Let's quickly open this up. Shehzad Poonawala, the national spokesperson of the Bharatiya Janata Party. Dr. Anand Ranganathan needs no introduction. Abbas Haider, national spokesperson of the Samajwadi Party. Tehseen Poonawala here with us in the studio, political analyst. Anand Dubey, spokesperson of the Shiv Sena. Gentlemen, good evening. Now, Dr. Ranganathan, before I open this up and get the political parties to take on each other, I want you to set it up for our viewers. Now, it was the Congress party, without a doubt, that has changed the constitution number of times. Yet, when the Prime Minister, and this was not the first time that the Prime Minister was offering his respect to the constitution. But look at what Rahul Gandhi has been saying, that this is utter desperation. And in fact, Jairam Ramesh has said that this is impact of Rahul Gandhi's attack on him.
Good evening, Pranesh, and good evening to my fellow panelists. Look, I just want to say this. We've already suffered Rahul Gandhi's theatrics for the last 10 years. Are we going to see 5 more years of this? I mean, it just seems ridiculous. What is he up to? Look at the irony. When he was all through the election process, he was saying, look, Modi is going to change the constitution, is going to amend the constitution. In the same breath, he was saying, we will break the Supreme Court 50% ceiling on reservations. And that requires amendment of the constitution. So he was the first one to say that he's going to break the constitution and he's accusing others of doing so. I don't want to go into the history of who has amended constitution most. Of course, it is Congress, and rightly you've brought out the data. But my contention is that the constitution has to be changed. That is what I'm saying. I think it is being dishonest and being disloyal to this country and its people if this constitution as we know it remains the same. Because as I say, bearing this constitution, we have been a banana republic ever since we became a republic. Why do I want the constitution change? Because the words secular and socialist were not there in the original constitution written by Baba Sahib Ambedkar. So the first thing I want the constitution to be changed is the word socialist should go. And if the word secular has to remain, then all those temple endowment acts that make it exclusively the control of the government, the temples, and not the mosques and the churches should also go. The RTE, in conjunction with the 93rd Amendment, that unfortunately was passed by both parties cutting across party lines, that shamefully discriminates only against Hindu-run schools, so that only they are to bear the burden of 25% reservations for the economically weaker section, not the minority-run schools. That needs to go. But most importantly, there are so many amendments that need to go, but most importantly, this subjective freedom of speech amendment in the constitution has to go. The first amendment has to go. So I want the constitution changed, and I want it for the betterment of the public. Shame on those Indians who do not want the constitution changed because they're hypocrites of the first order.
Tehseen Poonawala, allow me to read out a quote. Sure. It is impossible to hand up urgent social changes because the constitution comes in the way. You know who said this? Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. He wrote this in a letter to chief ministers early 1951. But let me quickly underline the point Dr. Ranganathan was making. Let's talk about the First Amendment. This was a provisional cabinet, did not even have the mandate of the people, and they bring about the First Amendment. Was that constitutional, Tehseen?
Good evening, Pranesh. Thank you so much for having me on the show. Right, you rightly put up that there were 76 odd amendments when Congress was in government, and about the remaining amendments about that our constitution has had have happened during other governments, about 70 odd other amendments. We're not talking about amendments to the constitution. And I think we should be very clear on and our viewers must understand the difference between an amendment to a constitution, which is the legitimate right of a government elected to do, provided it does not tamper with the basic structure of the constitution, versus changing the constitution, which is what BJP leaders said. They said, and I quote them, we will change the constitution. There's a difference between amending a constitution and changing a constitution. Now, Anand very articulately put the word secular and socialist were put into the constitution by Indira Ji. Yes, they were. But they were part of the basic structure of the Constitution, upheld by a full bench of the Supreme Court. But even then, if you believe that secular or socialist should not be in our Constitution, let the government try and drop it. There are multiple, hundreds of Supreme Court judgments that reiterate India as a secular country and a socialist country, because that's the basic structure of our Constitution. But you know what was the most scary thing? The chairperson of the Rajya Sabha, the current Vice President of India, actually saying that the basic structure should be looked at. A former Chief Justice who's currently in Rajya Sabha, courtesy the BJP, Chief Justice of India, questioning the basic structure of the Constitution. You know what's very scary? The Keshananda Bharti judgment being questioned by none other than the Vice President of India on the floor of Parliament, Rajya Sabha, where he chairs. Nothing can be more shameful than that, more shameful than that. And I say this with a lot of responsibility. The basic structure of the Constitution is what binds this country completely and gives us our freedom and liberty. I'll end with one example, and then you can go to the BJP. In various Supreme Court judgments, including in mine now, it's come that right to privacy is a fundamental right under Article 21. So they have life, liberty, etc. So privacy. Now let's see the Constitution is amended. Let's see the preamble and say, okay, life, liberty, privacy. Does that mean changing the Constitution? But what is changing the Constitution if life, liberty, privacy is removed? So let's understand, adding something that's a part of the basic structure is not changing the Constitution. That's amendment for a positive reason. Removing it would be negative, and changing the Constitution. BJP leaders spoke about changing the Constitution, not amending the Constitution. Let's be clear.
Okay, let's be clear. Shahzad, respond to that. You wanted to change the Constitution.
First of all,